Welcome back to House of a Thousand Books, your favorite horror book podcast, where we review all things scary from the page. I am one of your co-hosts, Brody, alongside my friends Gabby, Steph, Dan, and SJ. And this month, we are reading Slewfoot, A Tale of Bewitchery by Brom. Spoiler free if you haven't read this, read it.
Yeah, so Slewfoot is a story about this young woman named Abatha. She's sold by her father to marry this Puritan man in what is now what we know as modern day Hartford, Connecticut. She is married to this man named Edward, and they live together on this farm that is Edward's family's farm, and him and Abatha honestly like get along pretty well. They have like a nice little marriage. She is obviously now assimilated into like the puritanical way of life, even though she doesn't necessarily agree with it or really understand it. She assimilates because that's what's expected of her. Edward's brother, her husband's brother, says that he's in debt and there's nothing he could really do except potentially sell Abatha's and Edward's farm, mostly because they were paying him off and they haven't paid it off yet, so they don't own it. The brother still does, or the brother inherited it from the father. So now they're in like this whole property feud. So basically, the agreement comes that Abatha has to like pay off a certain amount of crops to the brother to now own the land and keep it from getting foreclosed upon, even though that wasn't an actual thing that could happen. That's kind of the main storyline. We're following Abatha and like how she's gonna navigate that and come to save her own farm. But there's like a side plot that is also kind of happening as we're starting to get the beginning phases of Abatha's life. And then the two plots kind of interject, and that is we're following this spirit, this creature, this being that like is a forest dwelling entity. And he kind of just woke up, or it kind of just woke up and doesn't know anything, doesn't know who it is, where it is, what its purpose is, and it really does a lot of just soul searching and trying to find answers. And circumstances lead their plots to kind of overlap. It's done so brilliantly with kind of weaving in the fairy tale aspect and the mythical creatures and the spirits and the gods, and it created a really kick-ass story, if I do say so myself.
So even if you don't know what the Salem witch trials were, this is a really very accurate portrayal of something that could have happened then.
But if the witch is slayed.
The witches
Exactly.
always slayed.
Well, the
If-
witches
if-
did slay.
Well, if they fought
then.
back.
If the witches were witches,
They were slayed.
Yeah.
not just innocent women.
Just, yeah.
I just want to say physically, if you have the chance to get the book, just physically very beautiful, very heavy, but very
Stunning.
beautiful.
Stunning.
Fell in love with it. Yeah, I want to get it hardcover. Like, I'm sold.
Yeah, hardcover would be a really, really pretty.
And a weapon. It is heavy.
Yeah, this was a cover buy for sure. And luckily, the plot inside held up to the cover.
We get illustrations.
I will say, when we were flying back home and I was reading this on the plane, when we landed and we were waiting for everyone to come off because we were in the back of the plane, one of the
Flight attendants.
flight attendants, one of the flight attendants, he like came up to me. He was like, "Hey, real quick, you went to the bathroom and I walked past you. What is that book you're reading?"
He did.
And I basically told him, I was like, if you love like horror and witchiness and you also love D&D, like it is a beautiful mixture between the two. And I love D&D. And we found out later on, because we were like, we need to know more about Brom, more about what he's written. And he's illustrated for a lot of D&D books. So it is, he shows his background shows, and I appreciate him very much for it.
I would say, spoiler free wise, if you're debating reading it, I almost let that deter me and be like, oh my gosh, it's gonna feel like homework or something. But then right midway through, I like couldn't put it down. So don't get discouraged by the size or the language, because it's still a great story.
That's a good point, Dan.
Yeah.
And a lot of people argue that this is more historical fiction than horror. And we'll get into it when we get into the spoilers, but I think there's a good case for that argument.
Ooh.
Yeah, like it uses all like the vernacular of the time period. It is very puritanical. That's the society we're living in. And I think the story would not, I would have it would have had a different impact if it used modern language.
But also, ¿por qué no nos dos? Historical fiction and horror.
Well, exactly.
History is horrific.
Yup, very that. And we'll get into that. All right. Yeah. So we are going to pick apart this book, give you all the plot twists, we're going to expose everything. So if you have not read Slewfoot yet, do yourself a favor and pick it up, and then coming back and listening to the rest of this episode so you could spill the tea with us as well. So I have a couple of just like talking points, but right off the bat, it took personally page 4 for me to fall in love with Tabitha.
Was it when she said "stop whore"?
Yeah, it was her cursing.
Her cursing is so funny. I agree.
She's a queen. She is a queen already.
Yeah, I mean, she had that like outsider, like already going against Puritan ways of life. I was immediately in. She's such a rebel.
It took me until Edward being gone to like really.
Oh, that
Oh,
took such a while.
No, I'm saying like when she was doing like taking it up a level and doing all the badass stuff on
Mm.
her own, it was like, oh, because remember when Edward was like silencing her and being like, don't speak up and all that.
So chapter 1 was I think the first page I like stopped and then I closed the book and I looked at the front, and I think that's when I realized for the first time that Abatha has goat legs. So I didn't know until I read the first page, and I was like,
such an eerie tone to kind of just set it off. Very mysterious. And then we immediately meet Abatha, who, like, duh, she's a queen. And then I initially had the bias that Edward was going to be really shitty, but then he turned out to be a cool guy. And I kind of loved him.
Yeah, I agree. I was the same. He was giving us really mean, like toxic masculinity vibes. And then I kind of feel like he's just like a little awkward like man.
I feel like they were perfect for each other just because he was such an outsider also. Like it was very later on too, it mentions how it's so like not cute, but like just the way she says it, she's like, he's never like been good like talking to other people. Like he always feels like awkward and anxious. Like, but like when we're together, it's like he could be himself.
Mm.
And same for her. And also she stood up for him. If she wasn't there, he would have been trampled on like 2 times as much. So
also, if he wasn't there, she would have been stoned so fast.
or like, yeah, sold to a worse guy. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they kind of needed each other to survive.
I guess not though. Because he dies.
Yeah, no.
Well, to be fair,
Yeah.
if he didn't die, like if she was never married to him, that scene where she is confronted by the Reverend and like she's like, all right, Abatha, this is the time I need to like this moment is so important for the rest of my life. I need to advocate for myself. She played that so I had to stop. I like I was like clapping for her. I was like, yes, that is the perfect way for you to do it. I was like, I don't know how she's gonna get through with this. And yeah, she could be a lawyer.
Yeah.
If you think about it too, like the fact that she's a woman, first of all, in this time period, like, and the fact that she's not coming to that table at the same level as like Wallace, because whatever Wallace says holds more weight automatically. So like the fact that she was able to be so like articulate and to the point and like make the council or is that what the council or the ministers or whatever see, because we know as the readers what she's saying is correct, like, and Wallace is a douchebag. That further sold it how much I really liked her character.
She was also just written so well. I mean, we've all had those moments where we can't hold our tongue kind of situation, and the way like she goes about it, the way she beats herself up internally and her talks to herself, she's just written so well. She has such a heart on her sleeve, and like you can't, I mean, I personally I could never hate her for it. Every time she did it, I was like, yeah.
I think it's also important to remember that she's not a Puritan. She's not from there. They bought her and shipped her over from England, I think.
Her dad sold her.
Well, her dad sold her for booze because he was a drunk. But so like these ideals that these people have been ingrained in and have lived in since birth, like that is not her story. She came here when she was like 15. So they're like, woman is submissive to his man. She's like, why? And I think Edward never really was either, or he definitely saw the flaws in like the Puritan ideologies. So when like Abatha wasn't really like gung ho about it, he was like, oh, finally, like someone who like I could also talk my shit with and be like, this shit's stupid. And he just gets so mad at himself, like when he lets himself like be like lustful towards her.
Wait, okay. That was my one flaw with him. I thought he was very, very nice, but that right before he goes into the cave and ultimately his reaction to the night that they spent together broke my heart. And I mean, it broke Abatha's too, but I was just like, damn, Edward, I thought you were cool.
Can we just take a second? Like, how just boring that life of a Puritan would be.
3 hours of church? Come on.
That's why they were riding brooms.
That's
Yeah,
Damn.
3 hours of church multiple times a week, and then just farm work when you're not in church. No.
Vermont.
I used to have such a hard time not falling asleep in 1 hour of church.
Oh my God. I told you all the story of how I got kicked out of altar serving, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
That was how much I loved church.
I got punished for yawning on the altar because it was boring. Yeah.
Me and my friends literally played games during funerals to make the time go by faster. Like, after we kind of get introduced to Abatha and Edward and they kind of get included into their life and their relationship, we get introduced to the biggest son of a bitch to ever live, Edward's older brother, Wallace.
like he says a lot of out of pocket things, just like, why don't you slap her? Or like, if that was my wife, she would have been slapped, and like all this other things. And then you learn that Abatha speaks her mind a lot and has been written up for it. Like, this is not her first time speaking up against a man. And she says it too. She was like, if this was my first offense, then maybe it'd be okay. But this has happened again and again.
And it goes kind of like even beyond that because she sees how they treat women, right? She knows the deal. Women get beat for less. They get beat for not having their bonnet tied and all their hair in under the bonnet. She knows what's going to happen. She's like, they're not going to let me just speak my mind and like confront a man. Like, I'm going to be in the stocks for a week. We didn't mention the book opens when we first meet Abatha. She's chasing one of their goats into the woods, which they're not supposed to go into. And he falls into this like whole cave. I couldn't really figure out what that was.
A pit to hell, some might say.
And the goat falls in. And Abatha is like, she has to tell Edward that the goat ran off. Edward goes to look for the goat, like looking into the hole. So he thinks he hears children's voices.
So creepy.
So Edward, being like the nice guy that he is, like leans really far in to like see the kids. And unfortunately falls down, and dies. And honestly, I was sad.
It was unexpected for sure.
It was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Like, all she finds is what? A tooth?
Yeah, and they bury an empty casket with just the tooth.
That her tooth in his clothes or something. Like,
Yeah.
oh, that. And then she leaves a charm on his grave. That there was a lot of, I cried a lot for this book.
And just further, like, how much I hate Wallace, because he shows up when she's like freaking out that he fell down this hole, and him and this other guy are like trying to tie a rope, but they're like, there's no rope that's long enough to get down there.
Mhm.
And this whole time Wallace is just like, go back home, Abatha, while she's like hysterical because like her husband just died. Basically at this point we find out that Abatha's mom was had some kind of powers, basically.
She was a cunning woman.
She was a cunning woman.
It was a cunning.
So
Put a T in there.
Silent T.
So yeah, we kind of get a little bit of a flashback where she had the spell book and also a braid of hair, which had her mother's hair and I believe 11 other ancestors' hair kind of tied into this braid. So 12 women total. And yeah, she had the spell book, and basically this flashback is of her father coming in, presumably like right after her mom died, and finds the spell book and burns it, and is against hunting women. So basically, yeah, it says that like Abatha, basically she remembers only some things from the spell book, so that's kind of what she kind of goes off of, but she does have this braid of hair still, which she feels gives her comfort.
The first time she touches the braids and she just feels like the ultimate, just like, oh yeah. No.
It's the 12 other mothers, like the 12 other witches.
And her like little coven.
It's coven.
Yeah, but she also doesn't know. Like, she doesn't know any of that, like what that power is. She does like little charms and trinkets and like gives like little love potions out. Like everything's so harmless because it's just, she's just playing. She doesn't really know why she does it, but she just does. It's natural to her.
And she explains the trinkets that she does make these women, because like one of them is just like, I want this boy to love me, which happens to be Wallace's son. And she's like, obviously he does, but I'm just making this charm so that way she feels better about it. And, there's just a bunch of natural remedies that she learned from her mom. Like in history, I guess if we're talking about like this is historical fiction, medicine wasn't always in pills. It came from nature. Like this is where we learned everything. There were apothecaries before there were pharmacies. So you needed to learn this from somewhere. And Apatha was just one of these people. She was smart. She was so smart. And in this time, in this setting, it just so happened that a smart woman was also labeled a witch.
Exactly.
A cunning woman.
And it just, but all these women are coming to her for these charms.
Edward warns her and he says, like, Abatha, I forbid you, like, no more spells. Like, swear to me no more spells. Yeah, he like has to control her, but also like he's scared for her.
He knows what's gonna happen.
He's like, they will kill you, and then that will kill me seeing you die. So you need to fucking stop this. And she says, and I love this line, I tabbed it. Must I swear off every pleasure in life? I'm sick to death of this want to suffer needlessly. Suffering does not bring one closer to God.
She also excuses her little trinkets by saying something like, I forget the quote, but it's like, God put all this here. Like, why can't I just give it out to people? Like, is this not me being a good religious girl?
Yeah, well, that comes like that is really apparent a little bit later when Sarah Carter solicits her help.
For sure, yeah.
And then
yeah.
she's like, how can I make this woman not think I'm a witch and just tell her this is what God wants? And it works.
Is she wrong? It
It
might not be
works.
their God, but
So I feel like we got a big chunk of like Abatha stuff. We definitely have to talk about this entity, soon to be known as Samson, because they're about to merge, basically. While all that's happening, Abatha and Edward's whole troubles, this entity is still in that underground cave, and these forest creatures brought him back to life, or were trying to bring him back to life. And the blood sacrifice from the goat, Abatha's goat Samson, brings this entity back to life.
Did anyone else have a hard time picturing the woodland creatures until
Yes.
you saw the pictures in the book? Because
Yeah.
they were described as like these looking like these animals, but also having the heads of children. And I was like, what? But the illustrations in the middle of the book help a lot, where it's like you have a possum and the possum's head is like open or mouth is open, and then there's like a little kid head in there. That's terrifying.
I did not allow myself to look at the pictures until I got there because I was like, oh, they're in the middle for a reason. Maybe like I'm not supposed to know something until I get there. And then I got there and was like, all these pictures would have been so helpful at the beginning.
Agreed. I did the same thing.
it's because of book printing. They need to be in the center fold, otherwise the book will fall apart.
Really?
Okay, like I get logistically, but like
No, that did.
maybe a disclaimer saying go look at the pictures. It's not going to spoil anything.
I will say this was a bit of a history lesson for me. So I don't really know much about Puritans, but I did study a lot of like Greek, Latin in high school. So for my point of view, once I saw Edward die, one, I was sad, but two, I was like, yes, Apatha, because in other places it's once you're a widow, like that is the most powerful thing you can be because you've already married once, you've done your deed. Now you can just be on your own and do whatever you want. So I thought that that's where this was going to go. So when Edward died and that didn't happen, I was like, oh, I understood how sucky Puritans are. I was like, you can't let this woman have one win at all. Like her husband is dead and you marry her off right away, or you like enslave her to her brother-in-law right away. That was a big shocker. Did you guys know already that that's kind of where it was heading for her when Edward died?
Yeah.
I was thinking your route, but also it made sense because in their eyes, she can't last on her own. She's not strong enough to do her own farm, which she proves wrong. But
yeah,
I saw that coming. But I was also optimistic, and I was like, yay, she gets to be yassified and be herself. But no.
Well, and I feel like ultimately she does get what you were talking about, Gabby.
Yeah, but she had to
when
fight
she
to a nail
But
for
she
it.
did have to fight for it,
Yeah.
right? Exactly.
Is it at Edward's funeral that Wallace is like, well, like it looks like the farm is mine now? Like,
Yeah.
doesn't he say it right there?
Yep.
I think so. Yeah, they didn't even give her time to mourn. Yeah.
And then she says, like, no, 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 no. I know the law. I don't know how she learned it, but she was like, I inherit all of his assets. So that farm is mine now. And if I can get that final payment to you, like we agreed upon, I own that shit now. But she's like, she says that out loud, but low-key, she's like, fuck, I'm not gonna be able to do it. Like she knows she can't by herself. There's no way.
Yeah.
But basically, she meets the entity, she meets Samson, and that's when their kind of relationship starts to bud. What do you guys think about that?
I loved their relationship. They were both at times where they were very in their lives where they were like very unsure. And I feel like they really leaned on each other to like, Samson wanted answers. Abatha wanted to save the farm. Their relationship was really cute. I really, really liked their friendship.
I think it also came out of like a place of purity because I think one, once Abatha knows, like when they have that first encounter where he grows the corn for her after she gives him, what is it, the honey,
Yeah. Well, she gives him like an
the
offering.
brittle?
Yeah. She makes him a
Yeah.
crown out of like flowers.
Yeah, there we go. Of course, like Abatha wanted to save her farm, but she just also wanted a friend, and Edward was kind of her only friend. So seeing someone else who needed someone to be with, and like he wasn't evil in any sense. He didn't know what he was. He just wants to find it out, and she's willing to because she's great. She's sweet. She understands that, like, I can't judge a book by its cover the way that people would judge me in the church and whatnot. So let me help out this being. Their relationship was very pure in that sense. As soon as they got together, I was like, yes, this is a match made in heaven.
You could say the two of them together was very Puritan.
I don't like you.
There were many times in the book, including this part because I have it tabbed, where it was like beautifully written out. It was like a little sensual.
Absolutely beautiful when they put their hands on the ground together and like, they're casting their magic. I could tell that Brom probably either had a great DM growing up or was a great DM or GM, I guess is now what it's called. Where it's just like it was very D&D the way that it was explained, how the magic happened and how it flowed through them. I was like, I've sat through so many sessions where DMs talk like this. So I again see the like D&D aspect coming through. Just everything about the way that they describe the magic happening, like when they're drawing everything on the ground and they explain that it didn't matter what they were drawing, it didn't matter what they were saying when they were chanting, it was about the feeling to it. And I just thought it was just so believable for me that I was just like, yeah, no, that makes sense. Of course that's how it would be.
It sounded very pagan to me. Like just how much they worship the earth and the leaves and the ground and the corn. Like,
No, yeah.
yeah, like of course, like my body is one with the earth. Like, yeah, it is. But like isn't our religion a little like you're giving yourself up to this higher power? Like you're giving yourself and your control over to something. Like it is very rooted in sex, I think. Can we also talk about the scene before we keep moving on where she's starting to do the farm work on her own, like the first day, and she like can't get the whatever she needs to get on the
Yeah.
donkey or whatever. So when she hangs a rope, and I was like, no, one day.
One day.
That's
She's
what I
so
thought too, because
real.
she had
That's-
mentioned suicide, I think, like
Yeah.
before that.
Oh yeah, she did.
Yeah.
That's what I would have
So
done.
she can't get the
Straight
like
up.
saddle on the donkey or whatever that she needs to go plow. So she hangs a rope and I was like, oh my God. But then she ties the saddle to the rope and then like pushes the donkey through and it works. And then I have this tapped again. So sweet, our girl. She says, Abatha felt a sense of pride. I did that, Edward. And if only you were here to see it, you would be proud too. I just know you would.
Yeah, that made
And
me cry.
and she said, I did that. I said, yes, honey, you did, mama.
But like that made me cry too, because it's like she just did this wonderful thing by herself and she can't even share that joy with anyone.
And everyone said, oh, like, you're a woman. Like, this is going
Yeah.
to suck so hard for you. Like, you're not going to be able to do anything. This is so
Oh,
sad.
I'm crying
And
just
she's
thinking
like,
about it.
I'm literally fine, everyone. That scene actually leads us out because then she has to go back to church. So she got a pass because her husband died and she's really like she's friendly with the reverend. So the husband or the reverend told her she didn't have to come to church for a little bit. And she could just focus on the gardening. So the first day she goes back to church and she's like, I don't want to go, but like I know it's gonna like people are gonna talk shit about me and be more mad if I don't go. So let me just go and get it over with. And then she encounters all the women who are doing just that. They're talking shit about her. They talk shit straight to her face and they're like, you should not be doing a man's job. Stop trying to do a man's job. Stop being such a burden for Wallace. Just give him the land, give him what he wants. And then she calls them all what does she say? What is I need her wording for it. You are all naught but a gaggle of cackling cunts. And I
That was awesome.
loved that.
The first time I read that, I put my finger down to it and went, "Ha!" And then I looked at Ashley, I'm like, I can't wait till you read this.
Meanwhile, too, we're also getting little glimpses of Wallace since the reverends in town basically told him that he's wrong and Abatha is correct and she has a right to that. He's now going from the settlement to Hartford, riding into the city and meeting with the magistrate. This is the guy who Wallace owes his money to now. Basically, yeah, you find out him and the magistrate and his kind of group of high ranking men in this society have an issue with Reverend Carter, Lord Mansfield. And I think the magistrate is one of the other characters that's there. He's the judge or something. And yeah, they have issues with Reverend Carter because he's been too lenient in the past with these things. And so basically they're on Wallace's side, obviously. While they're mad that the Reverend said you have to let Abatha try, they're like, don't worry though, because she's just a woman. She's not gonna get it. So that's going on at the same time.
Yeah, let her try. What's the harm? I didn't like think about the actual physical demands of that type of job. And like when they're like, oh, a woman can't do it, I'm like, Abatha can do anything. But then it's like on page 1 or 2, she says, she paused, trying to catch her breath, fearful for the first time that she might not have the strength to retrieve the bucket at all. She's pulling the bucket back up from the well for like the 100th time. She was down to only 2 chickens and she had 1 egg this morning at dawn, nothing since, and it was now well past noon. Her hands felt numb, her head was light, and the bucket was almost to the top. So I was like, oh, this is hard work. Like, this sucks.
Especially if you've never done it because the men were just doing it.
Yeah, and what she's doing is insane because there's been no rain. So what she's doing is she's walking to the well, filling up a bucket of water, walking back to the corn, dumping it down, and just continuously doing that because there's been no rain.
And then I thought this was funny. She says she thinks she's gonna die. Like for a second, she's like, I might die right here. And then she like laughs to herself. She says, well, at least my rotting body will fall into the well and then it'll spoil the water for Wallace. She managed a weak little chuckle.
Yeah.
Like, but oh, if I die, at least I'm gonna fuck him over.
Yeah.
So it'll be worth it, I guess.
Is that when the rope breaks
Yeah.
as well? Okay. So I do want to note something here because I thought it was going to come up later, but it never did. But so she passes out, right? And then she wakes up and then there's the bucket of berries that Samson has stolen from the other lady. And they talk about it later when Abatha finds out that they died and like people have been dying in the town. One of the things that was missing was her bucket that was brand new. And I thought that when Wallace went to Abatha's farm later on to like burn all the corn and whatnot, I thought he was going to find that bucket and use it as evidence against her, but that never happened. And did anything happen with that bucket? Because they mentioned it like very specifically. So I took note of it because I was like, oh, fuck, like they're going to have a trial and then this is going to come up and that's what's going to condemn her, which I mean, it never happened. But did you guys notice that or?
Do they mention the bucket to Abatha when they're telling her what happened?
They do. Yeah. They say that the bucket was new.
Maybe the only point of mentioning it was because then she was like, oh shit, that's the bucket that was at my house.
Yes.
Like,
okay.
So right after that hole, she drops the bucket, she goes back home, and then Samson comes to her house and she talks to him there. And
Mm.
this is when they really start to kind of like hack up this plan together. So first he asks her, like, who am I? Like, do you know who I am? And she's like, are you Satan? And he's like, I don't know. Like, am I Satan? Like, you tell me. And then he touches her, or she touches him. And I tabbed this. This was interesting. She says here, his emotions flowed into her along with his words, and she felt his loneliness, his despair. Abatha felt it too, the warmth. It was as though his thoughts were pushing into hers. So they immediately have something that neither of them understand, but something is there. I think that became like another really big plot point, like, kind of going back to Steph said, like there's a lot of like innuendo inside of the body and things like that, and it very much refers to them as being one somehow.
He also names him Samson then.
Yeah, so he doesn't know what his name is, and she's like, you killed my goat and that brought you back to life, so I guess to honor the goat that caused all this.
Yeah, she's like, I will not call you father. Like, no.
Yeah, no, because he's like, well, they're calling me father and I don't know like why. And she's like, well, yeah, that's not gonna happen, I'll call you Samson because that was my dead goat.
Well, like she touches his fur first. She's like, Samson.
So then, yeah, so from there on out, she calls him Samson. He gets referred to as Slewfoot. I think once before someone in town like sees him, he gets referred to as Slewfoot, as Samson, as Satan, as Father, as Shadow. So he has a lot of names, which I think is going to kind of become like a big motif in the story. Like, what is this entity, and like, is it good, is it evil, or is that even a real conversation to have? Like, is something as black and white as good and evil?
It comes up a lot. Like there's a lot of times I feel like where Samson, especially to Abatha, he's like, people keep calling me devil. Like I don't know what that is or if I am that. Like, am I that? And she can't really answer.
Really know like how I would know that, but like we seem to be getting along well. You seem like a chill person. You say you're not going to kill me, that you're not Satan, and I kind of believe you. So yeah, like let's just keep this up. Like I'm down. I'll worship you. Like I'll give you praise if that like brings you good vibes and like help spark your memory. If you help me kind of revitalize my crops and my farm and maybe be able to actually pay off my debt and own this farm.
After all of this, Samson has helped Abatha create a very plentiful harvest of corn. She's filled their barn basically with corn.
Mm-hmm.
And Wallace is like, because he's ridden by, he's seen how much corn, and he's like, there's no way. So anyways, he goes into Hartford again and recruits these Native American men to come and help him steal the corn. So he's like, you bring a cart, I'll bring a cart, we'll meet up, we'll go. They show up, Wallace and his son show up, also dressed as Native Americans. And so the Native American men are like, what the fuck? Like, whatever, let's just get this corn. So they go, sneak down, and when they go into the barn, they're like, holy shit, like this is a lot of corn. Like, even if we fill both carts, she's still gonna have enough to pay off my debt.
The debt and then some.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's like, no, like we can't do this. So he lights this on fire. Basically the barn burns down with all the corn. And while this is happening, the Native American men are like, fuck that. I'm not gonna go down for this. So they try to leave, and because of the fire and the smoke, Samson is already there because he's like, what's going on? So he kills those men. Is this when Abatha then also shoots Wallace in the leg? Or
I thought it was the bees. She sicks the bees on them.
right.
So what happens is they burn the corn, but then she's still able. So the reason why he goes to her farm to burn down the corn is because he runs to Hartford and goes, hey, like I need your help. And he goes, well, if she can pay up, then it's your ass kind of situation where it's like he says that since you're gonna lose the farm if she pays up, then you're the one that has to pay for it. So he's like, I'll give you a deal, instead of 20 years, only 10 years, and you only have to give a quarter of your farm or a quarter of your profits. You're losing, but that doesn't matter to me. So that's when he goes to the farm and he's like, I'm burning all these crops, and he gets Native Americans and he like devises that plan. And then she recuperates by using the bees. That happens like almost back to back.
The only other part that would also, I guess, be important to talk about before we get into like the whole witch trial is her helping Sarah Carter's daughter, because that gets heavily used against her later. So as we know, Abatha makes remedies and ointments and little charms and things that are harmless. So the Reverend that was really nice to her and his wife, Reverend Carter, their daughter is really sick. Abatha goes over with an ointment because she was nice to her. So she's like, let me be nice to them. And she low key works her little black magic. And she's like, I had this ointment's gonna cure her. I know it's gonna work, but like I need to distract them and pretend like I'm praying and like assure them this is what God wants and like say everything they want to hear so that no one will question it. And it works. She goes, she does a little chant.
She speaks in tongues and then she goes, Amen.
Yeah. Yeah, she does her fake little chant, whatever. And the daughter kind of feels better. But the daughter, this little bitch, she says that she could have sworn she saw like horns and like maybe like a dark figure, a dark shadow standing behind Abatha. But they chalk it up to that she just came out of like her fever broke and she was a little delirious. So like they let it go. Let's pick back up on where Brody was before this whole plot that Wallace had. And I don't want to spend too much time on it because it was negative, but everyone felt like the language around like the Native Americans was really insensitive, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But we're supposed to.
Yeah, me and Gabby had like a nice long conversation about it. I think, of course, I hate reading it and I hate seeing it and I hate hearing it and just being exposed to it. But it is the time period. I know that doesn't like give the author a pass for using like insensitive language, but like
Slurs. Yeah.
yeah, he straight up used like a slur. But again, like it's the time period. Wallace absolutely would have been using that language. So like I get it. I don't like it, but I get it. But yeah, I know Gabby kind of felt differently about it.
I think it just like for like us reading it now in the modern day, it just further ingrains this is not a good person.
For me, I think just overall, the painting of Native Americans just really threw me off and left a bad taste in my mouth for a long time. But again, me and SJ, we actually had like a pretty lengthy conversation about like why it was done the way it was done. And like again, this is my first Puritan style book. Like I've never read The Crucible. I've never really engaged in like Salem witch trials type things. So like that time period is just not really familiar with me. But he said that like the way that it, and like I don't want to put words in SJ's mouth, but it was basically just like it of course is like it sucks to read and to listen to, but it was the way that Native Americans were depicted back then, especially by Puritans. Like the way that like, you know, like you said, like they came to the tribe dressed as Native Americans. And yeah, as we go on throughout the book, it's interesting that they chalk everything up to Satan, to Lucifer, Slewfoot, whatever. But then when all hell does break loose, they chalk it up to the Native Americans over and over again. It's like pick and choose who your enemy is. Yeah, I struggled a bit with how they painted Native Americans in this book, but ultimately I think it reflected the time period. It's a hard line.
Yeah, I mean, like these colonies were formed by taking the land from those people and killing them. And part of that process is painting them in a certain light to make everybody on board with what they were doing.
Yeah, but even Mamunafet painted Native Americans so ugly.
That was a very interesting portrayal,
Yeah.
I will say. I agree with you there 100%.
And I think that's where my mouth
Yeah.
really was just like because like even in this kind of moment, you're still painting them like that. It's like, yeah, I think that's what it really was.
Yeah, right. Like the other moments we're seeing it from the perspective of the townspeople and the bad
Yes.
townspeople. I mean, all
Mhm.
of them were bad. But then yeah, in those moments, that's a clear like we're only like the narrator's there and these two characters, Samson and I'm sorry, I can
Mamunafet.
thank you. Which real quick, did anybody look up what that meant?
No, I
'Cause
did not.
In Algonquin, it stands for spider. Which
Oh.
I was like, I have to
Oh.
know.
I don't know. The Native American thing just really and we were like talking about that beforehand, where it's and you mentioned it where they were killing the wild folk, but the way that it's described with the Native Americans is that like they were greedy with it, that like all like it was very much just a bunch of greed and destruction. It played a lot into the narrative of how the Puritans saw the Native Americans, and that's what really grinded my gears in that sense. because they pretty much said that like they're just being selfish and that like they just wanted more and more and more, which is a very human human thing.
Well, that's the thing. I think that because Mamunifet shares that story to Samson when Samson comes seeking him out to like get some answers, and that's what he has that conversation with him. I think it was so important that what he was saying, because basically he was like, we used to live in harmony. There was a time where they worshipped us and they loved us and we would provide for them, and it was like a beautiful give and take relationship. But then they obtained some magic of their own, and then they started wanting more, and that greed is what offset this balance. And then we figured out we could no longer sustain that harmony. It was going to be someone was going to be dominant and the other party was going to be submissive. And the people in Mamunifet's and the other wild folks' line of vision and their scope, the Native Americans were people, period. General broad statement. So people to them are evil. And then it opens that conversation back up. Like, who is evil here? Mm-hmm. Is it the wild folk and the spirit, or is it the human beings that live in their realm? We are in their territory, right? We've just taken over their homes and their environment. So I think that is kind of why that was included, although the language around it wasn't great. I loved the purpose that it served.
Yeah, it's also it's the idea that like I think that it would have made more sense thematically if the people that caused the wild folk to disappear were Puritans instead of Native Americans, because just like in general, the culture of Native Americans is very much to give thanks and to cherish nature. So I think just painting that narrative and blaming it on Native Americans, that one hurt me. That's what really.
No, I don't think it made a lot of sense to me either, just because the plain fact of like like what we know about like Native American culture and this kind of idea that like Samson can give you a lot specifically through Mother Nature. And like I can't see Native American people wanting more than they need. You know what I'm saying? Like I think that it would have made a lot more sense to me if the wild folk and Samson, or the wild folk, because Samson doesn't remember, but if the wild folk were okay with the Native American people, because like they could have had a very fruitful like relationship, whereas then maybe the Puritans came and then everything went to shit, because like that's what happened.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because like it's like you said, it's all about balance, right? Like with Samson and that conversation of what's good, what's bad. It's like it's the balance of all. It's like Native American culture is very much centered around balance between nature and human. So that's why, that's my 2 cents.
It made sense. It seemed like that the Native Americans weren't really necessarily like in charge of those emotions. Like it was like almost a drug. It's like the way he wrote about it. Like they just needed more. They got that one taste of the magic and the power, and they couldn't help wanting more. That's human nature. It's like you got a little taste of something and now you want more of it, and they kept wanting more and wanting more and wanting more until all those
they do say
relationships and power structures flipped them on its head and caused all that chaos. So I understand that it could have been blaming them, but I don't even know if that was the point. Like I don't know if it even meant to say like it was their fault. I think it was like humans are flawed, and take any sub community of people and let them have a taste of power and they're gonna want more. Anyway, let's
so he puts Samson to sleep, and while this is going on, now that she sets the bees on Wallace, they have enough evidence. Not that they really needed any for the Salem witch trials, but they go to town, Wallace and his people, and they say that she's a witch. They give their evidence. They bring in.
That's all it takes. Straight white men saying she's a witch. Boom, trials are started.
Yep. That's all it takes.
So Abatha goes on trial for being an alleged witch. Ansel and Wallace and his son present all their evidence, and they say she's been trading trinkets. She's been creating like pagan symbols. They show the crown. They have do they have her mom's braid of hair, or she still has it?
No, she has it.
No, she still has it. But she has a crown of her own hair that she made for Samson. And then they talk about how the bees only attacked Wallace, so obviously she was controlling them. They talk about how all her corn grew miraculously, which they kind of were right about, Loki. And then they talk about how her cat Buka, like there's no explanation for how it's alive.
She has a cat,
Buka,
her familiar,
who they said she raised from the dead.
Yeah.
there's no way a woman could have just naturally brought it, like healed it back to life, because that cat definitely was dead when Abatha got it. So because of all of these reasons, they put her on trial for being a witch. What did you guys think about reading the trial scene?
I was just pissed off. It's just so annoying. And that judge from Hartford, like he sucks. Like
Ugh.
obviously I knew it wasn't going to be like a real trial.
Yeah.
It was a very, very infuriating scene to read.
Was he the one that insisted that the chair from England came back with him?
Yeah,
Yeah,
him and his
oh my
goddamn chair.
Yeah.
Guy sucks.
The chair, it came back from England.
Also, shocker that they kicked out Reverend Carter. Like, nope, you're too close to this. You don't have a say. That I was like,
As the trial goes on, then they bring up Sarah Carter,
Well, they bring up her daughter.
her
first.
daughter.
They bring
Yeah,
up her daughter first, and then her daughter speaks out against Abatha and says she gave me an ointment, she healed me almost miraculously, and I swear that I saw devil horns and a black shadow standing behind her. And then Sarah Carter kind of speaks up and it's like, that's not true. She had a fever that just broke, like she was hallucinating, like you can't really believe her. So then that kind of flips on Sarah, and they're like, so then do you think Abatha is innocent, like she's not a witch? And that lands Sarah Carter, the Reverend's wife, on trial alongside Abatha, which I kind of like was like, oh, at least she has someone, but also like, oh no, I know how this is gonna end.
yeah, when it first starts and they first bring Sarah Carter up, I think it was Abatha that like all she was thinking was like, please, like don't condemn me. Like do not, and she never did in the first half. She's like, no, like I will not lie on my name. The desperation in that moment where it really is one word against the others. And you know, it frustrates them because they can't get that out of these two women. But I thought that was very heartbreaking. She was like, if you say it, like we're both fucked. If you condemn me in order to save yourself, because they're like, if you just say that you are aiding a witch, like your sentence will be so much better. But she doesn't. And in that moment, the desperation that Abatha feels, I don't know about you guys, I felt it pretty heavy.
Yeah, it was hard to read. And again, just the bigotry and just these Puritan men like making the dumbest decisions. Because when they put these women in those cages,
Mhm.
I could not,
I screamed a lot.
I took a break from reading. I had to put it down for a second because holy shit,
Oh,
that was horrible. I literally wrote my phone gory, 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 all capitals, exclamation point, because what was that?
I actually ended up looking up pictures of these cages so I could get an idea, and yeah, they're tiny.
I literally I must have like read 10 pages and then went to Salem. And then Brody was like, very fitting for the book. And I was like, huh? Because honestly, I didn't even know it was the same time period. And so and so they did. I went to this like they do like a reenactment of a trial, like full like the whole everything we read. And then you go into the cellar and they have like mannequins in the cages, and it's literally like, yeah, that's where the poorest people would go. And it's like you can't like 4 people would be shoved in there and you could not even fit one.
Yeah, I've been on a few field trips there.
Yep.
Specifically where you're talking about, Dan.
Yeah, it's like that church thing.
Yeah, like just the accuracy is very, very impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Can someone explain a little bit more in detail of the scene we're referencing? That whole scene on like being trapped in the cages. These aren't like cages; they're special witch cages.
Yeah, I mean they're like tiny, right? And they have to climb in from the top. They have to crouch down basically to fit in, and even crouching down, the top of the cage slams into their head when they close it,
And they're like knees to chin.
and they have to stay like this for who knows how long, at least.
Days, I think.
mhm.
And Abatha's all injured. Her leg is all injured, and they just force her in there. And then when they take,
And slam it shut. Oh,
yeah, and then they're not only that, not only are you shoved in this cage, but now you have these two male guards sitting there like talking their shit, complaining that they have to be there.
Yeah, they're like, well, the last one I had to do took like 3 weeks. They're like, 3 weeks? You think we're gonna have to do this for that long? They're like, yeah,
oh, that was a hanging. Yeah, when they talk about the hanging, they're like,
yeah.
yeah, took a long time. And they're like, oh, but I have plans.
Yeah, he's like,
Um,
can you guys just accept it and die and like get over it quick so we can go home.
Like, they literally say, can you just confess? It's going to end the same either way. But if you just confess, this will be sped up.
And the birthmark scene with Sarah Carter.
I was just
Oh,
say.
that, yeah.
My God, that was so bad.
They basically have her stripped naked, and then they find every imperfection in her body and carve it out of her. They're like, well, if it bleeds, then we know you're human, but we have to make sure every single one of them is like a real birthmark and not just a witch's mark. So they like go through and they carve out. It is brutal.
And then by the end, they're like, well, better safe than sorry.
Yeah.
It wasn't just like a scrape of the skin. No, they were like digging around every area just to get it all out. Or so there was like a wording there of like, got to get the root out. And yeah, they were going into every part of her body and inspecting with their fingers and not like acting as if she was human. It's very, I'm sure that happened, but like you said, I've never read something like this. It was so sad.
Was so
Not
sad.
to mention like townsfolk just like coming and watching them do it.
Oh, for sure, yeah. For literal lies, like they didn't do a single thing.
For literal lies. Well, Abatha kind of was. She was a witch. Like, let's be honest.
No, I'm
like,
saying in the real life. In real life.
Yeah, and yeah, totally.
Well, she wasn't a witch yet. I mean, she was conspiring with.
I mean, she.
Yeah,
listen.
no, but like before.
They weren't wrong.
No,
like,
they were low-key right. But like, I don't agree with it. Let her be a witch.
Before Samson died, before the book even began, they already hated it. They would have hung her already.
Oh, totally. They would have made up a reason to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they were right. Like, she did use spells to help the Carter's daughter. Like, they were correct. She did conspire with the devil. But like, so, and what's it to ya? Fucking let her live.
Okay. But then on other ends, they were also pulling things out of air, saying that Buka is her imp because she was able to nurse herself. That the fact that she wears charms.
But honestly, she might have brought Buka back to life. She could have.
I don't think she did.
She could have. She has remedies and spells. She very much could have.
But before she met Samson, I don't think so, babe.
She still had power, though.
I think he helped unlock it, but before that, she didn't explain about having any power.
Samson helped her achieve her fullest potential, but she always had that power. She's a direct descendant of witches.
You're also right. Who knows? She grew up cunty. She grew up cunning.
She didn't know she was a witch.
Yeah, they explain. So there's this one part in this book. I had to take a picture and highlight it because I cried twice in one paragraph. But it's the last paragraph, 2 paragraphs, and it says, "No," Abatha screamed. "No, no, no." I started crying right then and there. Her scream turned into a wail as she watched the braids, that of her mother, of all her mothers, ignite and burn. I had to pause. I stopped. I had to breathe because I was sobbing. Again, like, it is just, Dan, don't laugh at me. It was so visceral, the way that she felt about these braids and like the comfort that it gave her. I don't know. It was very compelling when I was reading it. So I was sobbing. So I took a breath.
They took her one. You're right. Yeah. They took her one solace.
And it goes, the fire darkened, a reddish smoke spiraling up in flames, and a moment later, both the hair and the smoke were no more. "Mother," she whispered between sobs. "Mother," there came no scent of lavender and sage, no sense of her whatsoever. I cried again. Immediately. Sobbing. Samson's not answering her. They killed her husband.
Yeah, she's crying to Samson. She's praying to him.
Oh,
yeah,
please don't leave me. And like, her one comfort in this world, the only thing that she has from before all this Puritan bullshit. And they vanished. Oh, I was unwell.
The next day, after they inspect Sarah Carter's body, they're trying to get a confession out of her still, right?
Yeah.
And this is when they bring in in my opinion, one of the most intense scenes. Because again,
memorable.
This is something that they actually did, and I have it pulled up right now because I've been waiting to talk about it, where it is, they called it pressing, death by pressing, basically, where in order to get a confession out of her, they laid her down, put a board over her, and then they would stack stones on top of the board.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually she confesses, unfortunately, after
because of her daughter.
Yeah.
But she lasted very long.
She lasted so long.
She did last very long. But this was done in 1692 to Giles Corey of Salem.
Yep.
And he was crushed to death. And he was badass because I'm not saying Sarah Carter wasn't badass. She was.
Yeah.
But the reason why he got pressed was because when he got accused of being a witch, he just didn't say a single thing and refused to.
Well, his final words allegedly were more weight.
Okay, that's badass as hell. Okay.
That's so badass.
But ultimately, Sarah making the final confession that yes, I did corroborate with her and she was a witch, ultimately is all they need to go ahead and hang the witch. And they're not going to hang her in the way that I thought she was going to be hung.
Little tidbit. So I read this book. We only have one copy between me and SJ. So I read this book first. And they say, it takes like 3 to 5 days for you to die by hanging this way. And then I don't think you were reading the book yet, but we were watching the show called Grace and Frankie. And there's an episode where she's like hanging upside down and she's stuck, and SJ looks at me and like throughout the whole entire episode I keep on thinking like, how do I bring up that this reminds me of Slewfoot without making it like spoily? So then I was like, you know what, let me just type it on my phone, and then when he reads to it and gets to that part, I'll just bring it up the notes app.
She did.
So then he like looks at me and he's like, how long does it take for someone to die by hanging upside down? I go, 3 to 5 days. He goes, wow, you knew that off the top of your head. I'm like, yeah. And it was like 12:30 in the morning when I wrote the note. I was like, to tell SJ when he gets this part.
That's so funny.
But she did. That scene was brutal. Gory, gory, gore. Not only is she hanging upside down by her ankles, all the blood pulling to her head, but her dead cat is hanging in front of her face.
And the guys are talking shit.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Every death scene, I was just like, I would have been out.
My heart was racing because like she was praying and begging for Samson to come, but he was asleep.
Yeah.
And I was like, she isn't like, how are they gonna do this?
Creek and Sky distract Mama Vet, knowing that he would go and try to hunt them down. And that's when Forrest went into the cave and went to Samson's mask and was like, hey, you got a job to do, you're not done. And there's that whole entire scene where he's like he kind of just realizes what he is. He has the whole the backflashes, the flashbacks of his past lives and like who he used to be, and has like this very like glorious moment of like, I am good, I am bad, I am death, I am life kind of situation.
He says, I am the shepherd, I am the slayer, I am life, and I am death.
The 4 genders.
Yeah, well, Forrest kind of tells him all of that, doesn't he? Like, he gives him all the details, and he says, like, we were all full of hate and vengeance, and we put that hate all like into you, and that's what created.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Like, we used all of our anger, and all of our joint anger created you, like conjured up this being.
Yeah, like we didn't realize that our anger and our hate towards these humans would bleed into you, but it makes sense that it did.
Yes.
And for that, I'm sorry, but it is what it is now.
But then ultimately kind of was just like, but you are what you choose to be. Like, you are healer and slayer both. Like, nothing is as black and white as that. And they're also like, Abatha needs you, bruh.
Yeah.
Like, do you not hear her? Like, we all hear her screaming. Like, she needs you. You need to wake up. You need to get it together. You need to be for real, and you need to get out of here. And he does.
And he does.
So that is like gave me a sigh of relief, but that did not help. We're still reading about Abatha's torture. Like, I knew Samson was coming for her, but I still did not feel good about her situation. Oh, and then the guard is like being just like a dick to her, and it says, he took the cat and tied it to her so that it just hung against her face.
What a fucking bitch.
That was just not fair.
I think it's right before Samson comes, but he's like, we're the only ones here. We could just speed this up and kill her right now. And like, they're about to do it.
And then our hero arrives. Well, one of our heroes.
Yeah. the secondary hero, the sidekick.
Yeah. Yeah. The sidekick. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That is
Exactly.
kind of what he is.
He takes out the guards, or at least one of them, and gets Abatha down, but she's dead, right?
Nor.
She is just about there by this
She's
point.
basically dead, and he's very mad.
Well, because one of the guards was pinching her nose closed. Because he was like, fucking die already. I want to go home.
Yeah.
But from out of this perspective, she didn't see what just happened. So she's like, what? And then she says she heard a muffled cry and it's him trying to crawl away. But something seemed wrong with his back and he's whimpering like a child. But she felt no sympathy. None at all. Only an overwhelming desire to go over there and finish him off. And I was like, oh shit, here we go.
We're at the Carrie moment.
I was gonna say, good for her. This made all the suffering worth it. These last 40 pages right here, because ultimately Abatha gets down. Samson like revives her, brings her back to like a healthier state, not total revival, but healthier. And
Gives her his blood.
yes, and I mean, I was tabbing, highlighting because there was some banger one-liners, I think, once they both kind of come back. And he's like, what do you want to do here? And she's like, I want to kill everyone. I want to burn them all, and I want to see them all decimated to nothing. And
Okay.
he's like, where do you want to start?
On page 262, it's just another really great line. I'm not Abatha. Abatha was murdered. I am the witch, and the witch cares not for your tears.
Hell yeah.
Yes.
Abatha was murdered.
Yeah.
When you
Yeah.
were flipping through the pictures and you saw the witch, did you know that was Abatha, or did you think it was a different character?
Oh no, it's her.
Yeah.
I fully thought it was a different character. And I was like, I can't wait to meet the witch. Little did I know that I was friends with the witch the whole time.
Well, the hair,
Well-
and the cover.
I will say the cover I thought was like, I didn't know it would be literal. Like I literally didn't think we would end up at the end of the book with her with both feet.
Like, it just gets really graphic on like how she like tears apart these people, and it's one by one. We get to see like every little shot of one by one.
Yeah. A lot of the town gather in the town hall, which makes it really easy. Because then just burn that shit down and it's over.
No, I think the creatures lock them in.
Well, they have a bell to be like, Satan
it's like-
is in town,
oh.
so everyone come to safety in town hall.
Everyone come to the same
Yeah.
building.
And Slewfoot's like, easy. Well, he like distracts them, doesn't he? Like they have this whole like plan scheme going on.
Yeah, because he's then like, because they have like the guns pointing out the windows, and he's just like going from window to window, basically.
Appearing and disappearing. Yeah, because they can make people see them and not see them. Yeah.
You guys did say that it's Wallace first, right? Because it's Wallace. It's Wallace first.
So we get to the Wallace's house. Meanwhile, everything's going on. We just cut to Wallace's home, and he's having a nice sit-down dinner with his family. And he's being really just a dick as always, but to his daughter now that we just met for the first time, whatever. Right?
Oh yeah.
No, you know about her
okay,
from the
whatever.
church.
Doesn't matter. Anyways, yeah, he's like getting so mad, and he's like, I'm gonna like hit her or like something like, and then Samson and Abatha show up.
She basically like shuns his wife, so the wife doesn't get much done, or like levitates her or something. And then she deals with the daughter. I forget which word she carves, but she carves a word because she was basically like the daughter aided in
She carves liar into
the
her
trials
forehead.
and liar carves out her tongue so she can't lie again on people. And she's like, I'll let the both of you live. She like lets him go run away, and she's like, and now I gotta deal with Wallace. And there's a line
They
where
leave him.
they leave him.
Well,
They leave him fully.
before they let them run away, she's like, well, I'm gonna let you live because you know it's coming after you now. Like the devil
She does.
has your soul. And Samson's just eating their
Yep.
food, sitting at the table going,
Yeah,
And then-
that's me.
Yep. And then they run away because they're like, all right, now go. So they run away and they say, and if you could tell or if you could see what they're doing, you know they never did look back. So they were out of there.
And then for Wallace, she quotes what he said or a guard said, to where it was like, evil people deserve a long-lasting death, or whatever the quote was. And so I believe she
Oh, I have it
breaks a lot
actually
of his
right here,
limbs.
and it's pretty
Oh, okay.
gnarly. I was on the page. That was random. That was very witchy.
Okay.
She says to him, "I would like to offer you a choice: a quick, merciful death, or a slow, bad one."
And that's what they said to her. Pins him to the ground, breaks a bunch of his limbs, and he describes it as hearing vibration, and he's like, what the fuck? And then a bunch of wood eating bugs that he didn't know lived in his house come through his ceiling and his floorboards and everything, and get on top of him and slowly start eating at him as if he were the wood. And it's very detailed and descriptive and graphic, and I loved every minute of it.
I'm pretty sure there's a part where he says he can feel them crawling inside of him once they burrow through his skin. Oh, so
Yeah.
Yeah, that was gnarly. That whole scene.
So then she goes for Ansel and the Reverend is the one who cuts off his tongue.
Yes, so he cannot preach anymore and like spew his hate
He cuts
and
off
bigotry.
his own tongue. Oh, that was so disgusting.
Yeah,
I was doing nothing but screaming these last like 40 pages. It was
It
just a
was
bunch
gnarly.
I was reading
Yeah.
at 2 a.m. and I could not stop with this last part. I think that's when the shooting happens. And personally, I was like, girl, you're smart. You're just standing there with guns pointed at you and a townsfolk of people, and you're not like guarding yourself. You're not running, jumping. I don't know.
Well, adrenaline. She's feeling like she's a god.
Samson even told her, he's like, if you're careful, like you could live for centuries.
And she
Like
said,
you
no, how
have
about
the
I get
ability.
shot? That's exactly what she
And
said.
he's like, but you're not immortal. Like she was fully aware. I was a little frustrated with that as well.
Yeah, like, girl, get behind a bush or something.
I was just her rage. She wasn't listening. She wasn't able to be reasoned
She was
with.
blinded by rage. She's about to die, so she has like all of that in her. She is just the endorphins and adrenaline, and she just basically turned into a god. So like I don't know, I'd be pretty cocky.
I was frustrated too. Like it was her hubris. Like she flew way too close to the sun. Like she needed him dead. And I was like, let him live like 2 days. Let him think he's gonna survive, and then like sneak up on him. Like that would have been so much better. But no.
But like again, that's why I loved her in the beginning. She's exactly who she was before,
Yeah.
but now she has like autonomy, or like she has the ability to
She's
do something
reactive.
about it. So yeah. She's reactive, and I loved that about her in the beginning. So I couldn't fault her. I was never mad at her for going after
I just thought she
Ansel.
should have had a better safety plan.
We're just mad she died. And like that way, she had to die that way as well. Like that was also not the best way to die.
Yeah. No, that's because Ashley was like, did you know that she was gonna like come back? I was like, yeah. No, it read as though like, yeah. So I didn't cry at that part or anything. I was like, when is this bitch coming back?
She comes back
in the best way possible. I never thought an ending could be written so well. But basically, so he kills everybody in the fire, right? And then how does he kill Ansel?
No, he takes Ansel to do Bee's sacrifice.
Oh, right. That's what it was. So he takes Ansel and then takes Abatha's body, which is heartbreaking. He's like, it weighs like nothing. Like it is
skinny.
Yeah. So then they go she takes them back to the farm, and the whole time Ansel's like, why the fuck are we going here? Like what's going on? I'm like, shut up, you idiot, man.
Your body.
And basically like sacrifices him, cuts him by the throat, and just bleeds him dry all over. Is it all over the grass and everything's just growing? I forget.
A stone, like a ritual stone.
I think it's on Pawpaw.
It is on Pawpaw.
And then all Abatha's ancestors arrive in circle and are there to use their powers as they are in the undead to bring her back.
And there's the 12 women there, and it says 3 for each season, 1 for each cycle of the moon, and the circle is complete.
I want books for all of them. I need all their books.
Yeah. I
And Abatha makes 13.
I was gagged.
And Abatha makes 13.
Abatha's the 13th witch in her line. I was gagged.
Is it then when Samson also he like pleads to Mother Nature herself and just like the earth?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
And then like a serpent comes from the ground
and like goes through her body or something.
Mm-hmm. I had that.
Yeah, that was sick. It like filled her bullet wounds.
Also very sensual.
Very sensual. This book is very, now that you mention it, yeah.
Because then a fruit grows. Squeezes this fruit over her face. Blood red pulp and juice dripped through Samson's fingers, dripping onto Abatha's forehead and face, slithering into her eyes, her nose, her mouth. I am death and I am life, and the circle, it will go on. Abatha gasped. And that's the last word.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it.
Love it.
Chill. I'm getting, I just read this book. I'm getting chills right now.
No, because it's
Yeah.
true. He brings life as well.
It's beautiful, really.
Then we get the epilogue.
Steph, did you read the epiloge?
I did. I did. I told you
Yay.
that.
It was cute. It was
Good
cute.
job.
I liked it.
I loved it.
I didn't need it, but I liked having it.
No, I always like to see where we go.
No, it was a little corny for me.
Oh, I absolutely loved it. I
I
wanted.
loved it.
Ooh, divided. I didn't. I'm in the middle.
We move to 1972, the mountains of West Virginia, where we meet these two hunters who are just hunting. They've been hunting all day. They're assholes, obviously.
Yeah.
And just from the little bit we get. And then they come across this like hut in the woods. And I think they hear singing, right? Or they smell something. It smells good, whatever. They go and
Did they hear children's voices like
Mhm,
at
mhm.
Good?
yeah. Yes. Kind of leading them there. And then this woman comes out and she's like, "Oh, hi, like you guys made it just in time for dinner." And I think one of the hunters is like, "Ooh, like she's kind of hot. Maybe
Oh, damn
we'll get a
hippies.
little something, you know?" Yeah, they hate hippies. And then yeah, she invites them in, right?
And then they eat them.
They
They
get
get
really sleepy,
Yeah.
yeah.
They get sleepy, eepy, and
I wonder if
Yep.
I just thought about this now. Is that like showing that the two of them have to keep killing and eating people to like remain to keep their power?
That's in the sequel.
oh.
Slew feet.
I would love prequels.
Ooh, would you rather a prequel or a sequel?
No, I want prequels.
I would love to know about the witches. I really would.
Yeah, I want an anthology, 12 chapters, and each one is a different witch.
That's cool.
Oh, that
That would be fun.
Maybe I would read the perspective of her mom.
I know she went through shit.
I would also read about one of Samson's past lives. Too.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, yeah, he needs to just create a whole universe now.
Yeah.
I am satisfied with the way that the book ended and just her, I think just thinking that she lives the rest of her lives killing men in a forest is great with me. But I would, now that you say it, I would love to know about Abatha's mom and her upbringing, because like, you know, she was a bad bitch, bad witch, bad bitch.
When I read the end, I was like, oh, finally Gabby gets what she wants. The villains get murdered. Because every book, they're just like, but the villains live on.
Yeah.
No, literally.
It's so great. That whole last scene was amazing.
Yeah.
It was so satisfying. Yeah, you're
Sometimes
right.
I'm like, horror books shouldn't be happy endings, but I was like, okay, Abatha deserves a nice little bow on top, made of hair.
And I didn't know this was going to be a good for her story, and I loved that. And I really loved how I see the argument for historical fiction, but also like Brom used history as the horror. Like the scary parts of the book were not the demons. The spiders, yes, I did not like.
Like the bug
Like,
shit, yeah.
I was never feeling scared when I was like reading about Samson or like with the fairy
Mm.
creatures. Maybe Mabunifet's scenes were kind of dark, but like all of the horror lied with the Puritans. I felt
Mhm.
uneasy when Wallace was on the page. I felt awful during the witch trial scene, like the cage, the hanging. That's where the horror was. So how genius that he just used history as the device to drive this into the horror genre.
I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
Are we doing final?
Ratings?
5 out of 5 for me. I loved this book so much. I feel like that's all I have to say.
5 out of 5. I think I'd say that every time, but
No way, Brody. 5 out of 5.
this is 100% hands down one of my favorites of this year that we've read.
Whoa.
And it might be one of it's definitely in my top 5 favorites in general that I've read this year.
I will say, I was also a 5 out of 5. I really loved it. It took me a minute to get used to the Puritan language, and I think I just read slower because of that. And But I feel like once you got, or at least I got into like the like swing of it, you just kind of, it kind of became second nature, and then it just got really good. So yeah, 5 stars.
I'm gonna also give it a 5
Ow.
because yeah, like honestly, audiobook was on 1.0, which is shocking, and I was like into it, could not put it down for that finale. Super amazing world building and artistic writing. So when you do your job right and you write this good of a book, I need to give it a 5.
It is also a 5 star for me as well. I also think it is probably definitely top 5 books I read this year. Um, I loved it. I loved it. I love the witchy vibes. I love the fairy tale mythology vibes. The way Brom can write is really incredible and very compelling and very, yeah, it pulls you right in. I read like the last 100 pages in one sitting and I loved it.
Guys, this is our first 5 out of 5.
All fives.
Yeah.
We should have like a little like theme song or like a little like yay
Yes,
in the background.
And Brody, you did mention this. Me and Eshe were talking about this. I am 100% reading Krampus. I also want to read The Child Thief.
Yeah, I really want to read Krampus.
So the 4 of us, besides Brody, seem to not know next month's pick. So I think now is a good time to discover what our next read will be.
Yeah, so next month we will be reading We Need to Do Something by Max Booth III. Get it from your local library, get it used from thrift books or wherever you want to get it from. Thank you for listening to House of a Thousand Books, and be sure to keep up to date with us on Instagram, and you'll hear from us next month. Spooky reading.